I will mention off the bat, we have more than 90 people registered, but I'm wondering with the beautiful day, if we're going to have a little bit of drop off. It's, the sunshine is tough to compete with a beautiful spring day. But for those of you gathered here, this is going to be a really great session. We have two parts. We have a really great group of people from diverse companies and organizations that are here to talk to you about what is it like to work at the organization and what kinds of opportunities exist and how to position yourself for those opportunities. After that, we'll probably go for 45 minutes to an hour. After that, we're going to break into just informal sessions by majors, by concentration. So the digital media group, those who from that area will gather in one section, the corporate and organizational communication folks, and then the human resource management folks, okay? And we'll sort of pick up from the big discussion and start to talk about career planning and what comes next. Because many of you are probably at different stages, from starting to some of you who have just recently graduated and landed your first jobs. So I think there'll be great opportunity for exchange. Okay, so let's start. I'm so pleased we were able to assemble such a great panel. I want to thank you all for participating. I'm just going to introduce very briefly their names because the first question I'm going to ask them is to tell you a little bit about their backgrounds and how they got in the jobs that they're in today. Because that's what we're here for. So starting from your left, going from the far end, this is Christine Shadis. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's Shadis.
Shadis, cool. I should have asked that before. Christine Shadis, who is senior recruiter for emerging talent at Wayfair. Well recognized and respected company. Next to Christine is Dan Freywald. Dan, did I pronounce that correctly? All right, good, thank you. Dan is senior HR business leader supporting Takeda Pharmaceuticals Global Data and Technology Division. Again, another big name, Takeda. Right smack in the middle is our own Ellen Goldman from Northeastern. Ellen is Senior Associate Director of Career Design at Northeastern. So she works not just with college or professional studies students, but Northeastern students broadly. Next to Ellen is Carolyn Regan. Is it Regan or Regan?
Regan.
Regan, thank you. Carolyn Regan, Senior Vice President of People at RacePoint Global, a locally based, Boston-based, but global presence public relations firm. And next to Carolyn is Julia Garon. Julia is manager of the Education Partner Program at HubSpot. And Northeastern has been so pleased to work in that Education Partner Program. It's created great experiential learning opportunities through our classes and for the students. So, welcome, and first question, if I could, to the panel. Would you tell us, just spend a moment or two, tell us a little bit about your career journey. You can either work backwards from where you are today, but hit some of the highlights. How did you end up in where you are, and what did you learn potentially along the way? Christine, would you start us off?
Sure, absolutely. So hi everyone, I'm so happy to be here today. I have kind of an interesting journey in that I've ended up in a place that I never had really planned for. So my undergraduate degree, I have a bachelor's degree in political science. And I was not sure when I came home. I live in the Boston area, I'm from Massachusetts. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I came home from college. So I actually ended up temping through a staffing agency to try out a few different companies and see what was interesting to me. And the agency actually had an opening internally and said, you know, you've done really well for us as a temp, would you be interested in working for the company? And so the agency actually hired me. I did some recruiting there, and that's sort of where my journey started in recruiting and HR and higher ed. So prior to my current role right now, so I'm a recruiter on the campus team at Wayfair. I spent 11 years working at Stonehill College, which is just south of here, in Easton, Massachusetts, managing employer partnerships. So all of the companies who wanted to come to Stonehill to recruit our students. So right now I feel like in my role at Wayfair, this is kind of coming full circle and everything that I've really enjoyed, working with students, recruiting, because I'm doing both in my role now. And I will say, having a liberal arts degree, I think opens you up to so much opportunity. I know we'll talk a lot about skills through this panel, but I feel like I got a lot of great experience and great transferable skills through that I could use in so many different areas. And I did go on to get my MBA as well at Suffolk University. So a little bit about me, and thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Dan?
Sure, thank you.
I should mention Dan earned his graduate degree in corporate and organizational communication.
I was the first cohort that went through, but so I spent probably, I think, coming up on 21 years in HR in a variety of different roles. But I started, I came out of college and I loved the concept of training and development. I loved the concept of looking at an organization and trying to diagnose what their needs were from a people development perspective, where they were now, where we wanted to be, and designing something that was fit for purpose to get from point A to point B. I thought that was so cool. But coming out of college, my first job was at the Colonnade Hotel down on Huntington Ave, and so we're in HR, but worked in hospitality. The average tenure, I would say, is 28, 29 years of tenure in the same role. And very quickly I learned that they didn't want a 22-year-old kid telling them that they needed to learn new skills and sort of reinvent themselves. So really focused on the true, let's call it HR generalist type of experience. Had an opportunity to then move into a larger corporate organization. Then for the past 18 years, I've spent primarily in an HR business partner role, so aligning with a particular business and focusing on our talent strategy and our people agenda. Primarily in two industries, one in high tech. So I work for a company called EMC. I think Dick Egan is a name, and Roger Marino on campus. And then I spent time at Deloitte, and then most recently before Takeda, I was at BCG, Boston Consulting Group. So now my current role, I work again at Takeda Pharmaceuticals. It's the first company that I've worked at that actually is as a consumer or patient rather than a business-to-business type of feel to it, but I lead the HR team that is aligned with our data, digital, and technology teams across the globe. So happy to be here. And I'm sorry, I received my undergrad from Clemson, master's here, and then MBA from NC State.
Great, thank you, Dan. Ellen, I'm going to jump over to you to continue with our outside guests. Julia, would you say hello? Tell a little bit about your background.
Yeah, hi, my name is Julia. Okay, my name is Julia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently the manager of the Education Partner Program at HubSpot. So my role is to manage 3 excellent folks who who help professors best represent HubSpot in their classrooms all over the world. In terms of how I got here, if you can imagine, 2011, I graduated undergrad. I studied abroad. It was quite life-changing for me. So I wanted to be in international education. Has anyone here studied abroad? Okay, fun. So I went on Craigslist, which oddly was like the best option that I had at the time, and I found a summer camp counselor position. And so I worked with international students, or rather non-US students who would come to the US for summer camps between 11 and 17 years old. I slowly but surely became a full-time director for that program over the course of, I think, 2 years. And I moved to Boston to basically work full-time for that. And then after that, I went into study abroad. So I worked at a study abroad provider that I think works out of Northeastern sometimes. And I was there for about 2 years. The reason why I'm at HubSpot is I found a job that I thought I would be good at, and I applied for it, and then here I am. So sometimes it is quite simple in terms of just finding the confidence to find what it is that you enjoy or what you think you would be good at. So I've been at HubSpot for about 3 years. I've been in my current role for about 2. And I really enjoy it, and I'm always happy to chat about HubSpot. The part of my role that I enjoy the most is talking to students and connecting with students about what it is that they need to do to get the job that they want, and make sure that they're not feeling underemployed or certainly not unemployed either. And so if you have anything that you want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about it.
Thank you, Julia. Carolyn, can you tell us about your background?
Yeah, great. I am currently the Senior Vice President of People at Resiliency Global. I actually have 2 recent graduates here who also work at our agency. And I graduated undergrad from Babson with a technology and accounting major. So I really, have a different path forward. And I started working at a large company at the time called Digital Equipment Corporation. That's now, it turned into Compaq, then Hewlett Packard. And in that, I was in a technology development program. And a few years in, I realized I liked what the consultants were talking about more than what I was actually doing on the job. And I slowly migrated to more of a learning and development space. And from there, just started to work for another PR agency called Weber Shandwick, and took some time off consulting for a long time as I raised my kids. And then came back and came into this role, what I've been doing for the last 2 years, and I really focus on culture and creating a great environment for people to work. What I think my biggest piece of advice for all of you is to not think there's one path forward, and whatever you're studying now, but really think about what your passion is and where your strengths are, and be really happy with what you're doing. You might take a job for a couple of years where it's a good stepping stone for the next place that you're gonna get to. But besides that, don't stay in one position too long if you're not fulfilled and satisfied. And it's a balance between your passion, your strengths, and finding a place that you love. And that's really what I see as my job, is regardless of if our employees are with us for a year or their whole career, that they really love what they do, where they do it. And I feel like I'm a champion to help them get to that point.
Thank you, Carolyn. Ellen, would you say hello and tell us how you got here?
Sure. My name is Ellen Goldman, as you know, in career design. I actually took quite a path to get here. I started actually after college. I wasn't sure. I wanted to go to graduate school. I wasn't sure in what. I thought it might be in something related to counseling. And so I plopped myself at Harvard Mental Health Services, and I transcribed therapy tapes for all the different clinicians of all the different backgrounds. And then I did some temp work on the side, working with different populations. I ended up at a suicide prevention hotline and started a hotline for teens and adults, and I loved that, and I did that for a while. Went to travel, changed my life, and decided that I had always been really curious about the world of work since I was a little kid, and wanted to combine that with working with international students. So in the time that I've been a professional, I've worked managing study abroad programs for a college. I've done exchange programs. I've taught courses for international students. I'm working in the US, done co-op here in career design. And yeah, it's just really wonderful. And my piece of advice would be just be really curious, and things that you're really curious about, passion, if you're passionate about, if not, follow your things you're curious about. They will lead you to the next thing. They really will.
Thank you, Ellen. So five different people, 5 different organizations, 5 different backgrounds. But I think what you probably have heard, what they all share in common is they know how to identify the right people for the right roles at their organizations. And that's the connection that we're making today. So speaking of which, the next question I'd like to ask the group, it deals with culture. So we often tell students, look for that right fit. Look for that good fit, the organization where you can see yourself working. So, for example, think whether it should be a startup or a big organization. Part of that, too, in today's world, deals with diversity and inclusion. So could you all talk just a little bit about culture, diversity, and inclusion, and how new folks who are entering the job force should be thinking about those topics as they begin their career and search for jobs? Who would like to go first?
I can jump in.
Okay, great.
I think there's probably 3 pieces to this. One is the values that a company has. Are they just performative, or are they really part of who that company is? And I think the best way is to look at the leaders and see what are the things they talk about, what do they write about, how do they show up, as well as the company. The second thing are the behaviors, and you can dig into how do they really behave? Are they just talking, or are they walking it? And I think you can figure this out by doing your own research, doing some deep digging, reach out to people who work at that company or in that industry, and they would know. And then the last thing is just ask questions. It's so important when you go on an interview that you're not just on the defense. So show up, and obviously you'll have questions that you need to answer, but go in and be yourself and have some good questions around the things that are really important to you that you want from a company, regardless of what those are. So make sure that you go in with your full self and ask the questions that are really important for you, because there's nothing worse than you not being yourself in the interview, getting the job, landing it, and really hating where you're at, and that's not helpful for you or the company that you could go to work for.
Thank you. Christine?
Yeah, so I 100% agree with all of that, and to even add to that, you know, when we're talking about candidates, rather than thinking of a candidate as a good fit, I like to think about candidates in terms of, like, are they a good addition to the culture that we have? Because I think that that's an important perspective to have. And then also, you know, talked a little bit about not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. There's a lot of ways that you can find information on a company. I know we publish a DEI report annually and are very transparent about the work that we're doing, the numbers in terms of hiring. So seek out resources like that. And there's also opportunities at some companies you can have a culture ambassador conversation as part of the interview process and really get to talk to someone who's not involved in recruiting but is just doing the day-to-day work at the company, really just to get a sense of what it's like and opportunities to feel like you're a part of the community at that workplace.
Great, thank you, Christine.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna, very similar, I would just say, there's two pieces. I think you have an incredible opportunity because of the amount of information you have at your fingertips. So whether it's the social angle, LinkedIn, you can look at, search people. That hasn't always existed, but I think there's an opportunity from a mission-driven or a purpose type of organization to look at their social media presence, and then if interested, sort of dig down and look at different events that have happened over the past year, 2 years that are important to you, and you can make the correlation to say, how did this company celebrate that, address that particular event, so you can see if their how their portrayal of that same event that's important to you is aligned with your thinking as well. I say that's on a macro level. I would say in an interview, I love the idea of a culture ambassador. We have a culture working group as well. But to your point, ask questions. Not just everyone will say that they work collaboratively. But ask questions about how do you celebrate success? How do you address failure? How do you do it constructively? Ask those types of questions, and I think you can get a better feel, both at a macro level for the organization, but also the team that you may be coming onto.
Great, thank you. Ellen, you look like you want to jump in.
I was thinking about this because we coach students in career design, so everything everyone said, I completely wholeheartedly agree with. In addition, I would say, you can ask, you can look and see if there's a chief diversity officer or chief diversity and inclusion officer. You can ask the company to share some examples about how they ensure inclusion, and you can ask people receive training if it's tied to your managers or connected to your manager if you were selected their goals, if DEI is a piece of that. I think you can look for ERGs, employee resource groups, to see if they have that. Again, it's about that walk that the company and organization is walking. You can look at the benefits. Is it just, is there a range of benefits that make sense? And then, kind of thinking a little bit about, how do they, what kinds of leadership opportunities are there down the road? What kinds of joint groups can people participate in? What kinds of community involvement do they have? Just taking a look at a real gamut.
Thank you. Julia, do you want to add anything, or?
Sure, yeah, I have one thing to add, and this is actually borrowed from the legal world. I'm not sure if any of you have friends who are in the law school here. But there's something called a second look. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it, but essentially if you apply for a job as a lawyer, usually in a large, big law firm, you can ask for a second look. You can ask, can I talk to a person who X, Y, Z? So if you're going to be a working mother, if you are hard of hearing, you can, of course, you're not a checkbox, so you shouldn't ask someone to treat you as such. But you can say, hey, I'm super excited about this job, super excited about this offer. I'm going to be a working mother. I would love to talk to someone else on the team who is a working mother, who has some perspective to share. And if they cringe at that, well, that might tell you something about the company and its values, and that might give you the information you need to know. But people with the best intentions cannot read your mind. So if you're a working mother and it's super important to you, if it's something that you're not going to be super confident about in this new role, you should bring that up, and that's completely fair. So I would definitely ask if people who you identify with are not present at all during your interview process, ask for those folks to be included. And I agree with what everyone said about employee resource groups, ERGs, looking the organization up on social media and seeing like when they post, you know, there's something at HubSpot called Humans of HubSpot. Is it all one type of person? Is it all one type of person from a certain part of the country, right? Like, so is there any like proximity bias for where their HQ might be? These are all questions that you can ask your recruiter as well as yourself to determine if it's a good fit.
Great, thank you, panel. Let's shift to the topic of skills and competencies and what a job candidate brings to the table. Could you think about if you have a current junior or mid-level opening, or perhaps a filled one within recently, maybe the past few months, could you describe to the students what you were looking for in terms of the skills, both the hard skills, you know, what they actually need to do day to day on the job, but as well as the soft skills, what sort of separates out a really good candidate from someone that might be just average?
I can start.
Thanks, Dan.
Sure. One of the things that we coach our managers and our hiring managers in particular to do is to look and take stock of the different roles that they have on their team. And based on how they have separated the work, we ask them to separate some of their roles into what we call sort of proving ground roles, where whether that means that it's not as maybe you're dealing with clients that aren't as demanding, maybe they're a little bit more forgiving, but it's an opportunity for someone that may not be a fully formed, ready to go sort of fully proficient candidate to spend some time in a safe environment to learn new things, to make mistakes. And you know, I always have that conversation to say, okay, which ones are your proving ground roles? And that's where you're committed to spending a little bit more time and energy and effort and focus on those. And on the flip side, then we have roles that are sort of the season hand roles. And so you look at that to say, okay, if you start in a proving ground role, there's an opportunity, and here's how you can envision to get to the seasoned type of role. But I would say one of the things that we look at, particularly for candidates coming off campus, is some of the intangibles, I think, is resiliency. Particularly in the workforce, particularly over a long period of time, not everything is going to go your way. Not everything is going to work out, not everything is going to be 100%. And how did you deal with that? And how did you, like I said, how did you demonstrate that you can be resilient and push through things or do things in a different way that you may not be able to pick up on from purely your resume as well. But again, eagerness to learn, I think, is something that is curiosity, asking questions, and frankly, I think one of the things that I value the most is when someone tells me, I don't know what I'm doing. I would rather have you say, I have no idea what I'm doing. And more often than not, we help that kid. There's plenty of times where I say that to my team as well. I don't know what we're doing, but we'll figure it out together. It's okay. But like I said, the curiosity piece and the resiliency piece is really, really big for us.
Great, thank you. Who would like to go next? Helen? You look like you're ready.
Nope,
Nope.
I'm gonna defer to my.
You're going to defer to colleagues,
Yeah.
okay, good.
I can jump in. One thing we talk a lot about, and it's so important, is growth mindset. So it's some of the things that Dan talked about, which is to be really curious about what's happening, but also the vulnerability and the ability to fail. And we call it failing forward. So we love and when people put themselves in that position where they fail at something and then they learn from it and apply those learnings to what comes next. There's an amazing parable called the Parable of Oranges, and it's around how two people are given an assignment, but it's one who really thinks and brings in a different point of view and really thinks beyond the ask about what are we really trying to get at. And so I think of that as growth mindset. You know, how do you come in and add value and ask the important questions and really are able to say, again, I agree with Dan, with saying, you know, I don't know what this is, but I'm willing to learn and figure it out, and I might not get it right the first time, and how do we move forward from here? And one more thing is, especially with our earliest career folks, and I think our two Northeastern hires do this really well, is they self-advocate, right? So they'll raise their hands and ask to take on different assignments. They'll really say, hey, I want to meet different people, or I want this different experience. And so I find that that's really important, especially in this virtual world that we're all dealing with. You can't be someone who's a wallflower regardless of your personality. How can you advocate for yourself and the experiences that you need and what you're getting and what you need more?
Thank you. Christine?
Sure, so I would echo all of those skills that the panelists have put out there, especially not being afraid to fail. That's actually one of our people principles at Wayfair is, you know, being brave to kind of take the leap, and then if it doesn't work out, to kind of iterate on that, because we use data quite a bit as well, so that plays into it. But I would say aside from degree, probably the biggest things that we look for are coachability. Especially for some of our roles where we really don't focus on a particular degree. Some of them are really looking for some leadership experience. We're so collaborative at Wayfair that a lot of times you're working with multiple teams on projects, and so do you have examples on your resume of maybe you've worked on a project or led an initiative as part of a club? I think those are all really big for us. As part of our interview process, we do behavioral interviews, and we also have case interview components. And in the case interview component, there's some light data that you have to calculate. And I will say that we've had students who have not been perfect on the case interview piece, but who we've extended offers to because of their level of coachability. So maybe the interviewer has redirected that candidate a little bit, and they've picked up on it, or they've adjusted. I think that that's something that really stands out to me through the interviewing that we do, particularly with early talent, because that's all that I work with. So I would say coachability and then teamwork are probably our two biggest that we look for.
Julia?
Yeah, I guess to round out what everyone else said, but also I'll try and focus on something a little bit more, I guess, tactical. Because so many folks work either hybrid or remote roles at HubSpot and I know elsewhere, email and Slack or Zoom, what have you, has such a monopoly on how you're perceived. Does anyone read an email and I'm so glad I read that email, it's so clear what I need to do next? Well, become that person, right? Like there are so many podcasts, YouTube, books, if you want to read those, about how to write better emails. And it sounds so silly because why would you spend time learning how to write a better email if you could spend time learning how to code or something else? And I realize there are only 24 hours in the day. But how you're perceived is often so important for promotion opportunities and role progression opportunities. If your emails are untangling a ball of yarn and it's not clear what you're asking for, it's not clear what you need, people will read other emails, and the human brain is lazy. It's not going to, if you don't make it easy for someone to help you, they might not help you. And so look up like email etiquette, Slack etiquette, whatever tools you might use at your future organization. Learn how to write a really clear, simple, concise email. One of the things that I've learned in my journey on how to become a better email writer is write as if the person you're writing to is in the Hamptons on their break and reading it on their phone. So it should not be, if you're scrolling for 10 minutes, it's not a good email. They have better things to do like lounge at their pool. Like really pitch why this email is important and why they should spend time on it, And that all kind of goes back to what I said of write clearly, learn how to write clearly, and it doesn't matter your language skill, English is not your first language. You can write an amazing email, trust me. So that's kind of the one thing that I like to hang my head on in terms of this question.
We actually, sorry, I was just gonna add to that and say, we actually call it internally answer first communication. So basically starting that email message with the topic of your email or what you're hoping to get out of it, and then including all of the backup information below. So being really direct. And then if they have time to read what's below, they can, or they can come back to it. So that's something that is part of our culture.
I actually love that. I'm gonna try to remember that. Just to hear what we both said. I just on a slightly different tack, I had students who were given offers who were less experienced over students who were more experienced, because they really showed the employer, they demonstrated that they were really hungry for that role, and they owned their story and were able to relate their skills to the role and why they were interested in that organization. So I would say part of it is being able to tell your story, and part of it is really demonstrating that you really, this is not just shopping for a role, this is the role that you really want. Would you agree with?
Well, it's interesting because we just hired 4 interns for the summer, and I would say one of our interns, that was them. That was the person, they really went after it, and they showed such energy that this was the place they wanted to be. And then when they actually got the interview, they just nailed it and just brought their whole self in with all that energy and excitement for the job. So yeah, I would agree.
Great. Yeah.
The topic of experiential learning and how that translates into the workplace. So Northeastern is big on trying to create experiential learning opportunities in different ways. How do you all, from your perspective of representing your companies and interviewing candidates, how does that translate? Is that helpful? And if so, why? And I guess even more broadly, picking up on Ellen's word, what kinds of stories do you want to hear from students when they're interviewing with you about what they would bring to the table? Julia, do you want to go first?
So I think that experiential learning is really important in the eyes of most employers and recruiters. I think it helps to come to the table saying, I've seen this movie before, I've been in this position before, I know what it is that you're expecting. And of course, there might be, there might be a limited amount that you can learn over the course of a 2 or 3 month internship or a 4 month co-op, whatever it might be, but it is still a lot more than what other folks have. And this is not to put other folks down, but you're in a really privileged position to be able to have the opportunity to do co-ops or to do part-time work if that's what you prefer as well. So one thing that I often find in resumes that I look at that are students who have limited professional experience is these gaps in the resume. And I say, well, what were you doing between 2018 and 2020? Oh, I was babysitting, but that has nothing to do with the job. That's everything to do. I mean, make it have something to do with the job, right? You have accountability, you own problems, you put out fires. There's a way. I'm not saying lie, or hardly saying embellish either, but there's a way to show how you have transferable skills, from one job to the next. Don't discredit yourself, whether it's lawn mowing, babysitting, sometimes it can be Uber driving, or picking up different gigs at a restaurant. All of this it just shows how motivated you are. And I'm glad that you mentioned the word story, because that's kind of what, I'm not a recruiter, so I'll let other people say this, but I think that's probably what recruiters want to hear. They don't want to hear disparate data points. I did this thing, and I did this thing. There's no way in which they're connected. They want to hear stories of accountability, ownership, coachability, growth mindset, and often those are hidden in opportunities like babysitting or waitressing. Often they're not, but sometimes they are. So that's one thing that I would also point out. Don't discredit any of your experience, even if it's something that you don't think will transfer to a job, because oftentimes it will transfer to that job.
Can I just add an anecdote to that? I guess I would say, so I was going to say the same exact thing. So experiential learning means different things for different people, right? It doesn't always have to be, I worked in a corporate HR environment for the summer of last year. I guess the anecdote to that is that I just hired someone into our data science team. The only experience he has is working at his family's auto body repair shop. But the way that he was able to make the linkage between the importance of his family's business and how he grew into a position where his father was able to let him open the shop and close the shop and sort of run the shop and give time back, and just those linkages, again, had nothing to do with data science at all, but it was a really great conversation, and you could, we more often than not for those types of roles, we're hiring on potential, and you haven't maybe demonstrated that because you haven't had an opportunity to. So what are the other intangibles that you can demonstrate and the links that you can make to some of those? And so that was kind of a neat recent example.
The one thing I would add too about experiential learning that, and both of these panelists shared great examples, is when we hire people who don't have a ton of experience, they want to know how do they get an A, right? And in the workforce, there is no checkbox. Like you can't just go down and check the boxes to, you do these 10 things and you get an A in your job. And I think that's what experience gets you. It's like, how do you think on your feet? Where's that gray area? How do you get ahead in a space that makes you stand out in your uniqueness? And how do you read people in the room and the assignment and add value? And so it's so important, and you only get that in experience. You do not get that from just going into a classroom, because the classroom is a little bit more, even though you write papers and you do research and there is some really good thought stuff that comes into that, it's really important to have that experience. So you are all very lucky to go to a school like this where it has that cloud built in.
Christine?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would add, and I echo everything the panelists have said, is that for a large employer, an employer that's global and moving very quickly and has to be agile, I think seeing experiential learning on a student's resume, you almost hear in your head, okay, they probably will ramp up quicker, more quickly on their team than someone who maybe doesn't have as much experience. But I will say, so we read all of the resumes that come in. We don't have an ETS for campus. And there's a balance there. Myself, I worked 3 jobs while I was in college to make it work. And so I understand there's some of that balance too. And so I think experience can look different for everyone in a lot of different ways. And so I would echo, transferable skills is probably my favorite phrase. I'm from career development. I think just going into an interview, tailoring your experience to what that job is and what the description is. And the odds are that you have a lot of those skills that you can bring to the table. So rather than focusing on every single thing that you've ever done, pull out those meaningful examples that you can tie in.
Ellen, anything you would add to that?
I will just add, you really are fortunate to go to the school with these programs. And so I know that your program and the other folks here have some great experiential opportunities to take advantage of those. And whether that is the PR agency kind of connection you have, whether that's an XM experiential network project, whether that's a Husky Trek, which is out of our office, or internships or co-ops, or even shadowing, you have some great, a menu of options that will help you sort of gather some stories that will help you feel more empowered and more confident for when you do our interacting interviews. So that would be and I do see that it does pay off. I do see that it pays off in terms of employment and whatnot.
Thank you, panel. Let's open it up to the group. What questions would you like to ask? What would you like to learn more about, or based on what the panelists have said, what does that trigger in your mind? Amaya.
Hi, my name is Armaya. I just graduated last year, and then Professor Edwin is my favorite professor in this university. So I just want to ask, as an international student, what makes a company want to sponsor an applicant, international applicant? Like the requirements compared to the American applicant. Thank you.
So of course, this is a common question. Northeastern has a large international student population. So any insights that the panelists could share, building on Armani's question about, from an international student perspective, tips that you may offer?
I can share a little bit just from campus perspective. So for us, it varies by role. So typically the opportunities where we're able to sponsor, the candidates have a degree that's closely tied to that opportunity, and it makes it easier to make that case. So that's how we operate at Wayfair.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I would say, you just be very candid, the system and how it's set up is meant to give preference to people that are here and able to work without sponsorship. That's just how the system is set up. So, but I would echo what David said around the relevancy of the degree. I think it also depends on the company and their ability to go through that process and to be able to. I mean, it's an expensive process as well, so to avoid the expense to be able to do that. I would say from a Takeda perspective, mostly our whether it's the research organizations, so scientific organizations, and then also our data digital teams as well are, I guess I would call them more heavy users, I guess if you will, or more receptive to those types of questions and more amenable to. I think at the end of the day, though, it really also comes down to the candidate. If it's somebody that we want to invest in, and it's something that we see the opportunity, and as I mentioned, you're hiring on potential. If you see the potential, there's opportunities for students that come from probably different backgrounds.
Anybody else? Ellen, I know this is a topic you've thought long and hard about and talked with many students.
I know, I love this topic. I think that there's levels, right? So sponsorship for a green card is really expensive. OPT, optional practical training, requires no money, right? We pay the money, but from the employer perspective, they don't need to do that. So it's a great opportunity to audition somebody before you get to that point of sponsorship. And you can also do things like use My Visa Jobs and going global to mine that to see what companies have done in the past and for which positions. Because as Dan said, they might do it for one role. That doesn't mean they do it across the board, but you can do your due diligence to mine those databases to get a sense for what organizations have done before, and then how you can apply it to targeting. I worked with somebody who was going to be starting, very excited to be starting at Wayfair in July. And so really kind of combining your interests and your values, the fit, what you're looking for, what companies have done. And then there are companies that have never done it before that are smaller, but if you're the right talent or you have a particular fit, they might do it. But going go for the OPT first instead of trying for the H-1B. Do you think?
F1 with your OPT, I think absolutely. It's hard with H-1Bs and the lotteries and just the amount of people that apply for an H-1 and just like I said, the lottery system that has and then frankly changing legislation as well. Is something that makes it difficult to navigate if you're a small company as well, particularly with the changing of different administrations and different thinking on on rules and jobs, and also the job market as well. So there's a lot of different factors that I think lend itself more to a big company that has maybe a little bit more well-funded and has the opportunity to ride through some of the ebbs and flows of immigration policy rather than a smaller company as well.
And sometimes students will start overseas and then they'll come back in transferring with that company. And there are other immigration, so we just had 2 immigration attorney sessions. Their recordings are on the OGS website. Definitely listen to them so that you can get the full range. Yeah.
I definitely want to put in a plug for that. I went to that session. I learned a lot. The other thing I mentioned, within Ellen Center, there's, I call it a LinkedIn of Northeastern, where Northeastern students have created profiles from students from now around the world. And I think it's a great resource to be able to tap into. I've been amazed. I can appreciate from an international student perspective how challenging it is, but I've also been amazed how many have figured it out and gotten to where they want to be. So tap into those people through that network of people that Ellen's group has on its website. Who else has a question? Let's a quick exercise here, maybe to stretch legs as well. Those of you who are in the Human Resources Management program, would you stand up? So the left side of the audience. Okay, thank you. Those of you who are part of the Digital Media program, would you stand up? Okay, great. Thank you. And those of you who are part of the Corporate and Organizational Communication program, would you stand up? Okay, great. Terrific. So in a few moments, I'm going to ask the panelists one more question. In a few moments, we're going to break for some networking. I also want to take a quick opportunity to introduce some of our faculty who are going to be here as part of that networking. And so from our digital media program, I see Cynthia Barron and Jay Laird in the back. Would you stand up and say hello? Okay, this would be part of chatting. And then from actually from 2 programs, our Corporate and Organizational Communication program and HRM program, Patty Goodman. Okay, great. So, wrap-up question here before we break down for networking. If you had one piece of advice for a graduating, actually not even a graduating student, but particularly graduating student, but even some of these students are early on in their graduate program, planning ahead. What one piece of advice do you think would be most valuable? Sort of keep this always in the back of your mind. Dan, you want to go first?
Sure. I would say, there's one thing that you had said earlier, I would say, be your authentic self in an interview. For a number of reasons. First is, I would say, don't try to guess why someone is asking a particular question, number one, because you don't know why they are, what their right answer would be. But also, if you feel like you need to sort of modify how you would approach something, or that you would not be able to be your authentic self in that particular scenario, that particular team, don't force the fit. And I think to your point earlier, if you portray yourself in one way and you come into the group and that's not how you normally would act, it becomes very difficult and it takes a lot of energy away.
And I'm going to add one word to what Dan said. I would say be your most prepared authentic self. And so I think preparation is confidence. So even today, I'm sure all of us did some preparation coming in, and so we came in more confident. And so I think by doing your due diligence, you
understand the business. You see that everywhere, but there's a lot of people that don't do that. You'd be surprised how many people come in and have no relevant questions about either the organization. We talk about drugs and pharmaceuticals and pipelines and things, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do that. And unfortunately, I'm surprised sometimes when they ask really good questions, and it shouldn't be that way, but that's one way I think you can differentiate yourself, absolutely.
Yeah, I know when I apply for positions, I usually ahead of time have a vision for what I want to contribute to that role and why I'm looking at it. And I have tons of questions, more than I can ever get answered in an interview. And that's because when you're really, really interested in a position, really truly interested in it, you want to know a lot more than that's on that one little piece of paper That's the job description. So, I would say, I echo what everybody has said. And my advice would be both to think about, reframe the way people think about networking. Sometimes people think about it and they think about it like, it's yucky. Instead, think about it as like building your community, like all along the way. You're going to be doing it for your life. And I know beforehand, I was chatting with Christine. We both went to Suffolk, interestingly enough. And I was like, oh, we should go for coffee or lunch sometime, right? So you're just going to do it your whole life. And the other thing is start earlier than you think, so that you give yourself some time so you feel less pressured at the end. So utilize career design. There's so many coaching labs and LinkedIn groups, and there's a lot of resources that we have. So don't wait until you wanted the job yesterday.
As someone from the career services world, I 100% agree. Like, you have so many amazing resources at your fingertips here, and so I encourage you to get to know the team and use all the resources that they have. But I think my biggest piece of advice would be to be open. I worked with so many students over the years who put so much pressure on themselves to find the perfect job out of school, and that can almost cripple you in a way. And I think like focusing on the bigger picture and the company and the opportunities for mobility and employee resource groups, like the things that are really important to you. I think rather than focusing on that first perfect job out of school, focus on the opportunity that's going to help get you to where you want to be down the road, but while making sure that you're happy. So don't put so much pressure on yourself to find that perfect role. And that goes for down the lines throughout your career. Just be open to opportunity and to talking to people.
Julia, what's your big tip?
Last on the panel, I hope it's good. So I think of job interviews as like your Met Gala or your moon landing. Like, you're only gonna do it very few times in your life, comparatively speaking to how often you do other things in your life. So, as everyone has said, be prepared. I can talk about what that looks like for me, even if that doesn't look the same way for you. So, does everyone know about the STAR interview method? You've heard of it? Okay, that's still somewhat common practice, I would say. So when you have the job description for the role that you're applying for and getting interviewed for, this is what I did. If it sounds crazy, I'm sorry. This advice is not for you. But if it sounds good, then maybe you can try. So for every job description, for every bullet, I got flashcards, and I put the job description on one side and 2 STAR related or STAR formatted answers on the back. And so I knew going into the role, or going into the interview, if there were 10 bullet points, I had at least 20 different examples I can pull from. My point is not to do that necessarily, but do whatever makes you feel confident. I think what I got out of that experience was like, if I don't get this job, then it's not on me. I prepared the most that I could. I put myself out there. I was super professional. I was super prepared. If I didn't get the job, then it's not my fault. It is certainly just a culture mismatch or a skills mismatch. So I guess my one thing is do whatever it takes for you to feel confident. For some people that's preparing. For some people that's exercising right before. Whatever it is for you, it's not too, I'm sure you share those kind of habits with other folks that you maybe don't know. So whatever it is that makes you feel that way, please just do it.
These are great tips. If I could just summarize, I heard 5 key words from those tips. Be authentic, be prepared, be curious, be open, be confident, and do what's necessary to be confident. Good words of wisdom. So I want to take a moment to say thank you to the panel for sharing your thoughts and ideas with the group. So thank you so much.